So we have a lot of folks focused on just optical.
Dear Mr. Higuchi, dear Dr. Samanta Roy, ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists, good morning. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you at the Bavarian Ministry of Economic Affairs. I hope that you will enjoy your stay here in Munich. The weather is improving as far as I know, and you have a very interesting GLIC conference here in Munich. Bavaria, as you may know, has a strong tradition in aeronautics and astronautics as well, and you will find a complete landscape from industry to research to academia in Bavaria, apart from the production of satellites and all kinds of space technologies. We can offer a broad spectrum of Earth observation and satellite navigation competencies. The upcoming GLIC conference is themed from government programs to entrepreneurial action. A better theme could not have been chosen, at least from our point of view here in the ministry. Research funding has, of course, various motivations, but a key motivation is that for governmental subsidies, is that one day commercial applications can be found. And the accomplishment of this goal to find commercial applications is our daily work here, and to support commercial applications, our daily work here at the Ministry of Economic Affairs. In a first step, we fund basic or applied research projects as a base for future value creation. At the second step, we create business incubation programs to help overcome the gap between ideas and startup companies. And in a third step, we give financial aid to entrepreneurs to bring their products closer to the markets. Furthermore, we support companies to access domestic and international market through networking activities with the help of cluster management teams. As you can see, our daily work here at the ministry overlaps a lot with the topic of the conference. The CTO Conversations offer a perfect opportunity to network among decision makers and to get a common understanding of future market challenges. I'm glad that you're all here and that you support the discussion this morning of value creation from space technologies. It is obvious that the benefit of astronautics and space technologies to the public are often neglected here in Germany and perhaps in other places in the world as well. However, in our everyday life, we all use space technology and space applications. To conclude, I wish you a very successful conference this morning and during the next days. And I especially would like to invite you to join today's opening ceremony in the residence and also the state reception tonight with State Secretary Pschira. Perhaps some of you have been in the residence already and afterwards finding your way to this place. I can assure you the residence offers a great venue for an evening reception, and you should not miss that tonight. So welcome again, and it's my pleasure now to hand over the microphone to the President of IAF, Mr. Higuchi.
Thank you, Dr. Merz. Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this conference. We are delighted to have you here in Munich to participating in the Global Space Innovation Conference. Thank you for coming. We start the conference with this distinguished panel, CTO Conversation. As you know, Chief Technology Officer has the role of monitoring new technologies, assessing their potential to become new products or services for strategic business decisions. How do they see the space technology? Their view and discussion will be very inspiring to the society and the space community. The space technology is advancing faster than ever before, facing a new dimension. It's no longer only for academic and scientific achievements. I believe space innovation is expected to be more interactive with society, and that it will be the key driver of economic growth. The lead has shifted from the nation to the industry. I'm excited to witness the timely and hot discussion. Our special thanks go to Dr. Robie Samanta Roy, who will serve as moderator for this outstanding panel. I'd also like to thank the distinguished panelists from all over the world. Thank you for being with us today. Now I hand over to Dr. Samanta Roy, our excellent moderator.
All right. Thank you. Grüß Gott. So I have to remember a little of my German. It's been 19 years ago when I went to the International Space University in Vienna, Austria. And it was a 10-week program, a multinational interdisciplinary program, and we were immersed in Vienna. So 19 years later, I have to still remember a few words of German. So ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is really a pleasure and honor to be able to moderate this very distinguished panel. This CTO Conversation concept started by the previous Chief Technology Officer of Lockheed Martin Corporation, Dr. Ray Johnson. And what he envisioned was at a CTO, a deputy CTO, or at least a senior leader within the technology divisions of major aerospace, defense, or other high technology corporations, that there could be a conversation among senior leadership about a lot of the challenges and the opportunities, the trends that are taking place across not only the aerospace, the space sector, but the broader global high technology sector. And so out of this vision was born the concept of having a series of conversations. And not only within the IAF or the concept of what the GLIC is doing right now, but also be a broader aspect of tying into this conversation other high technology organizations. So what I like to do is first of all say thank you to our Deputy Minister Mertz for inviting us to this wonderful place. I'd also like to thank Mr. Hiroshi-san Higuchi for your basically partnership within the IAF for these conversations. And I hope that this is the beginning of an ongoing series of conversations that we will have in partnership with the IAF, as also with other organizations such as Science, Technology, and Society, which is another organization we've worked with in the past, as well as also the U.S. Council on Competitiveness, which works with a global council of competitive members to really deal with these various high technology issues. What I'd like to do is now basically introduce our panelists, say a few words about the topics that we're going to be covering today, and then, if you will, go through a dialogue with some leading questions. And then for the last 20 minutes of this conversation, I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. And the way that we will do this is on your chairs, each of you should have a pad of paper. And what I'd like you to do then is, if you have a question, please write the question down, and the question then will be picked up. We have Julia and Sylvia on both sides that will basically take the questions. We will look at the questions and be able then to appropriately give them to the right panel member. So with us today, we have, first of all, on my left, on your right, is Mr. Alexander Mager, who is now the Managing Director of the Ludwig Blockau campus. He's also affiliated with the Airbus Corporation. He's been with Airbus for about 20 years, and basically Alexander is going to provide some interesting insights in terms of a public-private partnership. You have a campus affiliated with a large major aerospace defense corporation, and what are the dynamics in terms of innovation in that partnership? Alexander has been working with Airbus for the last 20 years, has actually started in the helicopter sector, has moved into the space sector, and has a broad, if you will, background in terms of various aerospace, if you will, activities. And I appreciate his presence here in terms of understanding this whole public-private partnership with a major university research center. Next we have with us is Dr. Piero Misidero, who is now currently the Deputy CTO and the Vice President for our Research Development Technology and product policy at Thales Alenia. And he has been with Thales for over 40 years, comes with a strong nuclear engineering background, and has worked in the space systems arena for quite some time. And so I really welcome his perspectives from a senior leadership perspective in a major European aerospace development corporation. And next we have is Dr. Yasunori-san Mochiguchi, who is the Vice President of the Central Research Laboratories of the NEC Corporation. He's been with NEC for almost 30 years and has a strong electronic engineering background, has worked in various levels of technical leadership, especially in the fields of signal processing, natural language processing, data analytics, which is a very important area today in terms of big data. And so we welcome your presence here in providing a perspective from a company that does work obviously in aerospace, but also it has a very strong presence in other non-aerospace and defense markets. Next, we are joined by Professor Andreas Rittweger, who is the director of DLR's Institute for Space Systems, but also as a professor for space technology in the University of Bremen's Faculty of Production Engineering. And so I find it very interesting. Again, we have a perspective between a university and a government perspective. I think that's going to be important in our conversation. Next, we have Dr. Dan Snused, who is the technical director of the Western European Industrial Business Laboratories for the 3M Corporation. And as we all know, 3M is a company that has been known for its innovative culture. And we found it was very interesting to make sure that we had a company that is largely focused on in the private commercial sector on non-aerospace and defense, and what are some lessons learned in terms of innovation processes and culture that we can bring to bear across this conversation. And then lastly, but not least, a colleague of mine within Lockheed Martin, we have Mr. Scott Faust, who is the Vice President, Director of our Space Systems Advanced Technology Center, is located in Palo Alto, right in the heart of Silicon Valley. And Scott has been almost 9 years with Lockheed Martin, and before that has had a rich background in terms of small businesses, starting up small businesses, working with the United States' Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, which has worked on a lot of interesting cutting-edge technology, and prior to that, working also in large corporations in the aerospace sector, for instance, as Hughes Research Laboratories. So, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining. I think this is going to be a very interesting conversation. So to get to basically the panel going, I'd like to say a few words about where we stand today in the world of high technology. So it's interesting, when you look across the world of where technology is going, it's very interesting that we have a convergence of three major elements. We have the importance of the internet and ubiquitous connectivity, something that really didn't even exist to that extent, even a decade ago. We have now the richer emergence of mobile computing, and the fact that all of us have these mobile devices, that each of them, their computational power is more than it was all on the computers that were on the Apollo spacecraft, which is amazing to really when you think about it. And then lastly, we have this whole element that we have cloud computing, which is the element of the emergence of the fact is that your technology is not so much only on your device, but it is now within this cloud. And so now at the end of the day, you have at the democratization of technology, where you have technology design capabilities that are available to any individual on a global scale, and at the same time, all the way to the production side, you now have the emergence of additive manufacturing and 3D printing, where an individual can actually go off and do a design and build something at their own self, right? We also have the fact that from the flattening of the world to the globalization of technology has meant that the private sector, especially a lot of these innovation clusters, which we'll talk about, have been thriving on these rich partnerships between industry, government, and academia. And this is a very interesting stool. I call it a three-legged stool, and that for innovation to work, you have to have all of those three elements work together in a strong partnership. And we do have representation from all of those three communities. And it's important that as we grow in our technology investments and ultimately the rewards of technology to society, that we foster this strong partnership between all three elements. That's a very important element. The next is the element of the acceleration, the rapid acceleration of the deployment of technology. And that is something that we were really going to talk about in terms of the classical aerospace and defense sector is working on programs that are, quite frankly, decadal in scale. And yet, within the private sector, you are now seeing product development taking place at the 18-month level. So how do you deal with this, if you will, dichotomy in terms of technology development? A few other things that we are going to also talk about is the human relations or the talent management aspect. Now that the demographic of the workforce is changing, we all talk about in some of our classical aerospace and defense companies, millennials, the dynamics of the workforce is changing. You no longer have individuals that may work in a corporation for their entire career, but they'll now work for, let's say, 5, 10 years maximum, move on. How do we leverage that dynamic is going to be very important. And then lastly, I think what is interesting is we'll talk a little bit about is when it comes to disruptive technology, and what do we mean by disruptive? I'm going to ask all our panelists to talk from their personal perspectives, what really is disruptive? And I think, from my personal perspective, I've only been at Lockheed now for about 15 months, and Scott will provide almost a decadal perspective from a Lockheed perspective. But I think it's important that we look at the element of some of our classical technologies or platforms that we develop, and now we have new technology insertion that could be, quite frankly, game-changing or essentially eliminate a current product or even create a new way of doing something in the space or the aerospace or even the non-aerospace world. So it's going to be very interesting of how we deal with this disruptive technology and have a balance between the long-term investments that we need for foundational technology as well as things that are happening much more rapidly at the commercial level. So there's a rich number of topics that we're going to cover here today, and I really look forward to the panelist perspective. So without further much ado, then what I'd like to do is just to start off to get us warmed up a little bit is to go through and just from your personal perspectives, gentlemen, tell me a little bit about the topic of disruptive technology. What does it really mean to you? And really from a CTO-like perspective, how do you actually manage the balance between profitability, existing products, and how are you going to actually manage the disruption of technology from a technology innovation management perspective? Alexander, why don't we start from your perspectives, and then we'll go down the line.
Yeah. Let me allow to define disruptive technology by giving you an example.
Exactly.
When the invention of the electric bulb back in the late 19th century, that was clearly a disruptive technology, especially for those who were producing candles up to then. And more recently, the invention of LEDs, light emission diodes, is certainly disruptive when considering those folks who have missed that trend and are still were in the electric bulb business. So that's a typical example to me for disruptive technologies. However, it's not limited to the technical arena. Disruptive can also take place in non-technical areas, such as inventing new business models or new processes. You just mentioned a little before the internet. Just think about using the internet as a sales channel. Talking about a company like Amazon, for instance. I mean, those wholesalers and retailers who haven't seen that trend in time to use the internet as a sales channel, they're either in big trouble or they simply disappeared. So that is also disruptive. So in other words, I mean, we talked a little bit yesterday already, about, so it's a kind of a game changer. Things which is really fundamentally changing the environment. That is, to me, disruptive. Just excellent. As a first statement.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Piero?
Okay, first of all, good morning to everybody. And I would like to thank the organizer and Robie to permit my participation to this interesting discussion. We say Alex used already my preferred definition, so which is game changer. But apart this statement, I would like also to propose you an example different from the previous one. Quoting Ford, the famous starter for automobile in general, he said, if I asked to the people to innovate, they would have said, I need horses which are running more faster. And vice versa, he decided to invest in a new thing. So this is what we mean with the disruptive innovation. Coming back to the way in which we see in general technology and innovation in our company, I am in the CTO group since a couple of years, and I am in charge in Thales Alenia Space of this innovation and technology aspect. I don't know if because I am Italian, but the reason of this is basically the fact that we have to look to short and medium term and also to long term. And in short medium, we are doing technologies, innovation or better evolution, looking to the product insertion. In the long term, we look to really something disruptive. And we have mainly few pillars in which we go on with this innovation. Some of these are internal and some are external, which means in collaboration with the ecosystem. And in particular, we take care, but we have then the possibility to discuss more deeply this aspect. We take care about networking with the academy, small, medium enterprises, startups. But I would like to mention in particular what we are doing internally. We have an initiative called the Innovation Cluster, which is quite new. We are doing 1 year of we say practice right now. And this innovation cluster is putting together in a network some people of our company, which mainly young people, I would say, which has we say a positive tendency in terms of culture with respect to innovation, and then provide them some amount of money to pursue their initiative, and on this basis try to bring a new culture in terms of processes, in terms of business, in terms of technology. This is what we see in this area.
Okay, very good, excellent, thank you. Yasunari-san, please.
Okay, yeah, I work mainly in the IT arena, and literally I think the disruptive technology can be defined in such a way that the existing service can be achieved by alternative technology, and very often they tend to be already existing. And one good example, of course, is mobile communication. Later it became mobile internet or mobile computing. But when it came first, for the first time, you remember that the quality of the sound, voice was much lower than the established wired communication. But, you know, then things changed and made a big change in whole the IT and service, and maybe making impact to the other industry segments. But of course, I fully agree with the opinion of Alex, who said that disruptive innovation sometimes rely on technology, but on the other, also on other types of game changer and the business model and stuff. And I think it is very interesting to observe the IT is the world where a lot of disruptive innovation took place successfully, continuously, starting from mobile communication, then to internet and the cloud computing, and now people seeing Internet of Things. And of course, at every stage, people brought new ideas which are really disruptive, impacting the business model. But I also see some continued a trend of how the disruptive technologies or innovations are coming into this world. My opinion is one is things become more and more software defined. Another thing is people getting more and more aware of openness, open collaboration, and such like open source software communities. Yes, and the third thing, most important, is now people starting to realize that final value delivered is shifting from every product or service based into the experience delivery. And that's why I believe is that Apple has come up with a very explosive increase in their iPhone business. Every people wanted to have the experience rather than this machine or that software. So now trying to answer Robbie's question, how to make a balance, and it's really difficult. And maybe it's impossible to manage all the disruptive innovation for a single company. So we always have to be aware of the two aspects. One is the challenging aspect, and the other one is the opportunity aspect. The challenging aspect is, of course, disruptive innovations tend to seriously damage existing expertise or competitiveness of the segment, because not just because it is disruptive, also such disruptive innovation is brought by a player which has a different investment mechanism. For instance, right now Amazon is a big player in cloud services, but at the time at least when they started a big cloud service business, the investment came from another segment of book distribution. And server is also, the existing players tend to make repeated investment to advance their own technologies coming out from its industry. But now there is, for the server world, there is a consortium called Open Compute, which didn't like the set of existing server players and tried to make an innovation in the cost that the server can be fabricated. It also comes from a different investment mechanism. So, of course, we have opportunities. It's not just the winner of this disruptive innovation creator, but it also brings opportunity to make other players to work in a new disrupted value chain or a disrupted business opportunities. So we encourage our researchers to take a look at such opportunities closely, and that's something we believe is very important.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Andreas?
Yes, for me, disruptive technologies are all things which increase the performance by more than 30% or reduce the costs by more than 30%. Usually we are developing things in small steps. That is more or less an optimization of things. Such is more an evolutionary process. But disruptive technologies are a revolutionary process. Disruptive technologies, I give an example in the aeronautics. We all are using today aircrafts with swept wings and with jet engines, and these jet engines have axial compressors in the turbines. This was established in the early 40s, and there was a need to fly faster than the classical propeller aircrafts. But you have the problem if you want to go faster. Of course, the resistance is growing in square with velocity, and additionally, you are near the sonic barrier. And they tried to find solutions, and it was very difficult at this time to find the way. It was not an invention by one person. It was really a common activity and a collaboration of a lot of scientific institutes to find and define the way how to make a subsonic fly efficient. And they decided it has to be a swept wing because it has less resistance. They decided it must be an axial compressor because there was already existing radial compressors. They are also efficient, but they have a larger diameter and produce more resistance. And that was exactly the correct way. They made the prototypes, they started the production, and later on all the other countries in the world used this technology because it was really the right way to do it. And nothing has changed by this principle in the last 70 years. All the other steps were small evolutionary steps. They increased always a little bit the performance, but basically nothing changed. But that is really was at this time a disruptive technology. What does it mean for us for space? For instance, all what we are also doing at the moment in our classical launchers is optimization. The breakthrough is due to disruptive methods how we do it. If you take SpaceX, there is no new technology what they use, but the way how they organize their company, how they produce, they have thought about what is pure form economical thing, what is better to make and what is better to buy, and so they have structured their company and all their processes, and the result is that they are much more efficient than the classical way. And they put Europe under pressure, and so we see now the benefit of this disruptive way in the Ariane 6 program. It is decided also to do it in another way. It's not a copy of SpaceX, but it goes in the correct direction that they try with a new governance, which gives the industry, the prime industry, the full design authority, so that they have also the flexibility to design their industrial processes from economic point of reason. And that is then also a benefit for the taxpayer at the end, because this launcher industry will then be more competitive. But from technology point of view, it is still the conservative technology, only optimized. Disruptive would be to go a step further to introduce reusability, and again driven by SpaceX, which may now the experiments to fly back the first stage, which is also a disruptive way to do it. It's the first time when they first made the first experiments, we thought they try to start somewhere on the land and to land again on land. But how they do it on a platform on sea is a genius idea.
Right, exactly.
And
so we'll have a further discussion about sort of the interplay between sort of the longer term foundational things and sort of the, if you will, the concept of operations, of how you take, you know, foundational technology and then put it into affordability, operability, etc. So that's a great point, Andreas. Thank you. So Dan, over to you. You know, 3M has is known that you have something called a product vitality index, where you publicly state that a certain percentage of your products over a given amount of time are going to be basically renewed, right? So, which is a very interesting, fascinating way of really turning over your product line. So, a few words on disruptive technologies.
Yeah, so a lot of good definitions have been provided already. One of the definitions I like is just it redefines how things are done, whether it's how you buy your music, listen to your music, whether it's you know, how you manufacture products. It just redefines the new standard, and if you don't change to that standard, you will become extinct, basically. So that's one definition, and one of the things you mentioned, our new product vitality index for 3M. We have a very strong innovation culture, and we can talk more about that later. But the new product vitality index basically says, you know, a certain percentage, and we target 40% of our products sales are new products introduced within the last 5 years. So we basically have an innovation concept or culture which says you need to redefine and reinvent yourselves. You need to displace yourselves in the market before someone else does. And that's kind of how we deal with disruptive technologies, is that we disrupt ourselves and plan on using investments in technology and science to do that, again, to ultimately solve customer problems or problems that we see out in the markets that we serve.
Very good. Scott?
Okay, well, what's fun about being last, and I'll figure out what can I add to what already's been said. But, and as Robie said, I've spent most of my career working for DARPA, and DARPA has a very high bar. They want a kind of they'd like to call it order of magnitude, you know, 1 or 2 orders of magnitude improvement. But from my perspective, one of the things that comes down to being a game changer is part of changing the game is changing the measures of the system. So, you know, a lot of times, especially in national security, you tend to have measures of effectiveness and measures of performance. And many times when you have a disruptive new capability, it'll actually change those measures of effectiveness. I'll give an example, a Lockheed example, stealth aircraft. You know, heard some stories recently about when they first were developing the F-117, you know, one of the first stealth aircraft. and they specified it, and they had a certain, they specified certain characteristics like maneuverability, which were, that was just bread and butter of doing aircraft specification. And then halfway through the development of that particular platform, they discovered they weren't going to have the maneuverability they thought they needed. What was interesting then, though, they had learned, because it was such a different concept, they actually discovered that that wasn't a requirement anymore. And in fact, for it to be stealth, you didn't want to be maneuvering, because the whole point of stealth was to very much control your orientation. And to me, that's an example of a disruption that requires a whole new way of thinking. And why I like to think of those as an example is that one of our challenges as we try to find this disruptive innovation is being able to let go of the kind of our preconceived notions of what should be the measures of effectiveness and measures of performance. Now, some of the challenges we talk about is, especially in a large organization like Lockheed, as you try to champion some of these disruptive concepts, is the number of people you have to get to agree that it is disruptive and is worth doing. And what I find is that inside the lines of business, you'll see two folks, and we've already talked about it. Some will see it as a threat to their current business, and will do all they can to fight it, because they don't want to give up that revenue stream. They don't want to let go of the current business model. And then you will find individuals that are willing to do that experiment, that are willing to take the risk of moving to a new economic model. But the problem inside a corporation like Lockheed is finding the critical mass of those people that agree that it's worth doing. And this is why we sometimes talk about how the stars align, getting enough of the leadership all in line to where they'll say, this is worth doing. And we see this both, I've seen it now in my career at Lockheed, and it's also in doing work for the military. You have exactly the same characteristics. So some of the things I think a lot about with respect to disruptive innovation.
Great. Well, thank you, Scott. So, it's kind of in a quick summary, the way I think about sort of in a high-level view for innovation is, and we talked about this, in our dinner last night, about the 4 Ps of innovation. It's process, innovation, which is, essentially it can be your business model, it can be how many signatures that you need to actually get something done within your organization, right? So process innovation is very important. It can be the whole, the model of how you'd sell music, on the internet. There's obviously product innovation, which is related to technology. That's obviously a very important element. Then there's the people aspect, and we'll get to that shortly about, it's how do you manage your workforce? How do you manage folks that are very creative and talented, and you don't suppress their creative urges, and you actually are able to capitalize on their ideas and bring them to fruition. And then lastly, there is this issue of places. Where are you actually located? And this gets back to, if you will, the whole notion of innovation clusters that was mentioned, and the fact that you have these rich ecosystems in certain geographical locations like Silicon Valley, where Scott you are, where you have a close interaction between industry, both large and small, as well as academia, as well as government. And it's that rich interaction between that triangle, if you will, or the stool image, if you will, that basically drives interesting ideas and takes them from invention, which is the creation of new ideas, to actually putting them into something that's useful or profitable, which really is the innovation process, right? You go from an idea and actually go through a very careful investigation phase, and then ultimately you implement something in terms of a product and service. So that's great. So what I'd like to do now is talk a little bit about the element of first of all, the term we've talked a little bit about was technical intelligence, which was how do you actually scan or look ahead? Where do you know where that next big thing is? You're sitting in a CTO's organization, and your job is to make sure, so Scott, you've worked with DARPA in the past, and they always say, we want to make sure that our customers are not surprised and that we create surprise. So what are the mechanisms? How do you work within your ecosystem, within your staff, within your partners, just to make sure that you're not surprised? And ultimately that you are one step ahead of your customers or your competitors, and making sure that you are creating, if you will, surprise. right? So who wants to start with that? Actually, have any volunteers? Wants to start to talk about how do you, within a large organization, look through and do technology horizon scanning and make sure what is that next big thing that we really want to capitalize on, make sure our competition doesn't do that, and we can ultimately, be the first to offer. Alexander, sure.
Because I just wanted to say a few words on this last discussion, because you were mentioning just now, again, the word competitors. And I believe that the aerospace industry is facing, well, you can almost say, kind of disruptive new competitors. The old school environment we were facing during the last decades, Airbus, Boeing, Thales, Lockheed, BAE Systems, just to mention a few, that's done. Today, our new competitors are Google, Facebook, and others. Google, Facebook, they were recently acquiring aerospace companies.
Yes.
So that is, we as the old school aerospace companies have to deal with. And that is also a major aspect of this discussion on disruptive technology. So we have definitely to change sort of culture. And that is going, of course, through people, clearly. Right. So coming to your question right now, how do we manage these risks? What do we do? First of all, I believe you need to ensure that your company remains leader, at least in those areas of the market which you deem strategic. So that's very important to remain really a leader, to have a leading position. And in order to stay ahead of the game, you have a couple of tools and methods you can use, which are enabling you to stay ahead of the game. For instance, transversal innovation, where you make all your several divisions work closely together. You can do it via open innovation in order to allow newcomers or partners through licensing programs to participate through partnerships. You can also do some kind of out-of-the-box innovation, greenfield innovation, to just come up with completely new ideas in areas you haven't been involved so far. So these are all methods you can use in order to be prepared. And within Airbus, for instance, they call they define critical and breakthrough technologies via the so-called R&T roadmaps. So these are people focusing really on these R&T roadmaps in order to be sure not to miss anything major, right? And you have a couple more of instruments, behaviors, philosophies, which you need to put in place. For instance, you have to have facilities capable of doing rapid prototyping, as another example. Maybe you need to focus on software. Maybe you should think about your diversity in your company. Lower your costs, be faster, be highly creative. So these are all elements you can bring to the table. You need to certainly have also experts in your company, a network of experts who are continuously monitoring the market, the new technologies, the new processes. You can establish fab labs, biz labs, just to allow your own people to work such as they were not working anymore for a big group, but just behaving like being a startup company. So there are a couple of ideas you can set up within a CTO organization to ensure not to be overcome by surprise. By surprise, right. Exactly. And by the way, what Airbus is participating in this Ludwig Bölkow campus, that's exactly what we're doing. And at this campus, we try to bring together SMEs, big groups, research institutes, the government, which is funding the campus, all stakeholders together at one side in order to have these folks work closely together. Not via email, not via phone, but no, to be located at one single site and ensure a regular exchange of ideas and hopefully coming up with new ideas, maybe even disruptive ideas, not only anticipating them, but coming up on their own with such ideas. Interesting. So these are all kind of instruments, tools you can set up in order to facilitate that process in order to avoid being surprised.
Wonderful. Piero?
Okay. So I noted, Alex, that you are doing the same things that we are doing.
Surprise.
So the competition will be tough.
Well, actually, one of the things I just want to mention, this is one of the things I hope we get out of this is some of the best practices and the sharing of best practices. So this is perfect. This is perfect.
Okay. Apart the joke, we knew that. But apart the joke, I already anticipated in my previous introduction that we are facing internally and externally this point. So I mentioned innovation cluster, which in our terminology is an internal initiative, more devoted to create culture, create innovation from our expert and our people. That's fine. I would like now to touch a little bit in the direction that you suggested, what we are doing externally. In particular, there are some specific area of intervention that we are considering. Just to mention one aspect that you didn't touch, which we call innovation hub. So Thales as a general organization and our space part of Thales in specific, just quote an example, we are very active in the Singapore area, for example, where Thales has an innovation hub there. And so thanks to this cooperation, we are in touch with all the ecosystem that is present in that area, because the market is interesting, because there are very new ideas coming up in that region of the world. And we are collaborating with local university, with local small enterprises, to work together, first of all, on a research technology basis, and hopefully later on a product basis. This is just one example. Another example that I would like to quote, at least this is valid for our European perspective. You know that European Space Agency, which is one of the major actors in space activity, is enlarging the group of members with what we call new members, so visa. For example, nations like Romania, Poland, Czechia, and many others. These new areas are really potential partners of cooperation. Because they, first of all, they need to improve their involvement in space, but also because normally the young people there are quite motivated to inject new ideas and new perspectives. And so this is another way in which we try to look to an open innovation manner to the system. And another point that I would like to quote in the context of European Commission type of technology activities, H 2020 and those type of aspects, in that context is very much growing what we call regional, we say, point of view. Regional, we call smart specialization. Basically, not only at national level, but each region, like Bavaria, which is interesting in the promotion of innovation and technology and so on, may, I would say, put European money in this area and originate new ideas and new utilization of space, not only technology-wise, but also service-wise. And this is exactly what we would like to do when we try to be in a network of small, medium enterprises, startups, research center, academies, on a district we call aerospace district basis. So there are districts in many countries, and for example, myself, among other duties, I am in charge of one of the working group of NIREOS, which is the network of European region utilizing space. And there is a working group dealing with space exploration technologies, not because space exploration is directly linked to utilization, but because you can have a very interesting spin-off of technologies from space exploration down to other sectors, robotics, health preservation, oil and gas, transport, many other things. So this is just a few examples, in addition to what has been correctly said by Alex, that I would like to put to your attention.
Wonderful, thank you. And I was just going to say, so we are also getting a perspective here from a very multi-geographical perspective. We have Europe, we have North America, we have Japan, the Asia Pacific. So Yasunori-san, I'd like to hear your perspective. And you work in an area that there's also a lot of consumer electronics. So how do you look at the surprise in this arena?
NEC actually specifically has shifted our business focus from covering a broad range of electronics business now into what we call a social solution. So we are getting a little bit off from the consumer electronics. We're now trying to solve the issues and trying to deliver high value to the public and as well as enterprise customers. Now, can I a little bit talk about what's been touched by the previous speakers? You point out that there's a new game change coming, even in the aerospace industry, as compared to the existing players, and now Google and Amazon stuff are coming. And talking about technology intelligence, I think not in early days when IT stayed just IT, but now the IT people are looking toward inter-segment interactions, new chemistries, are trying to bring higher value leveraged by IT technologies. And I think it is useful to take a look at the implications taking place in other industrial segments. For instance, automobile industry is a good example. When it happens to be also Mr. Elon Musk who founded the Tesla Motors, as opposed to the existing large automobile industries. They don't just deliver electric vehicles, but the cars they deliver is something connected cars, software-defined cars, and it'll be very useful to take a look at such things taking place, also from the aerospace industry, robotics. And we always encourage our own research scientists to look at what kind of implications that will result from something new. Because just collecting information, pieces of information, nowadays, there are lots of research firms like Gartner, IDC. It's rare to, rare for something really disruptive technologies coming from nowhere. Very often, I think the disruptive innovation or disruptive technologies comes after having several winters. So, of course, our research scientists are supposed to make new technology innovation, but we also have an expectation for such research science, taking a look at the history of what the such certain technical field has been evolving. I think it's, and also mix such knowledge and expertise with the, as I said, implications of what gonna be the impact in the new type of game change. And that's not proven yet, but I think this is very interesting. Of course, the another important aspect is try new things to get results. And our company happened to also have a strong focus in such activity in Singapore, actually. We opened a new innovation facility organization 2 years ago. And because the government there is very aggressive in trying to find out, not just think of, find out new innovations leveraged by IT, and we really fully agree with such strategy.
Okay, great. So let me switch gears a little bit and focus a little bit. So Andreas, you mentioned is a very interesting thing when you were talking about the evolution of, if you will, in aeronautics, which is obviously of relevance to the aerospace world here. And the basic concept of a tube and wing aircraft, and the classical turbine engine. And now we're having some interesting disruption in terms of new business models, approaches, and we have to give a lot of credit to NASA coming from a U.S. perspective in terms of taking the risk to work with commercial crew, cargo, and these various other programs to say, okay, look, we can turn to industry, see what they can provide in terms of access to the space station for cargo, etc. But I think what you were pointing to is there's an interesting issue. When you look across the time scale for long-term technology development, there's still a very important role for basic research, for foundational research that feeds a pipeline. So Dan, you mentioned a little bit from your perspective, material science. Well, 3M will do a lot of still foundational material science that will ultimately lead to the next generation of duct tape or, to a Post-it note, etc. So Andreas, if you're speaking from a DLR perspective, where do you see things moving? Because quite frankly, governments now are under a lot of pressure. And so the amounts of money, the resources to do that long-term basic research is coming under pressure. But that is the pipeline, so we need the research to do the transistor, to do that next generation of the internet. NASA has put out, if you will, a number of technology roadmaps, foundational things. What do we want to do in nanotechnology? What do we want to do in other structures and in robotics, etc.? So how do you see moving forward this, the governmental aspect for research into basic research and then ultimately to take that and transition it more rapidly into the private sector?
No, from point of view of a governmental research organization, yes. You are absolutely right. We have the advantage that we can perform our views for a long-term perspective, which is necessary for developing technologies. That is different in industry. They are more oriented year by year for their impacts, and that is a completely different thing. Even though we are a governmental organization, it is not so that the government says what we have to do. The only is that they decided the amount of budget which we get. But so we have indeed the freedom to decide the technical roadmap. Mm-hmm. And very important is that we do it not alone. It is necessary to exchange with the other institutions, with other research institutions, with industry. We try to collaborate with the industry. We exchange our ideas, our roadmaps, and we discuss how to agree also. We have examples, for instance, in the north of Germany, we have an example where we cooperate for new technologies for upper stages. And both industry and research organizations are working together on the same problem, but there is no money involved that government pays for it or so. That is, everybody puts its own money, and we cooperate in this. And it's a good working model, mm-hmm. because the objective is clear and shared. Mm-hmm. So that is also the point. We avoid surprises later on.
Right.
And that is for me the key, anyhow, to exchange with all industry, with other research organizations, also to use synergies of other domains. That is also a recommendation. We have nice examples where we contacted also for exchange completely other institutions, for instance, for deep sea exploration, mm-hmm. a completely different domain like space. And we found out that there are really some synergies in how they make exploration in the deep sea and what we are planning in exploration on planets or moon. And so we have cooperative projects out of it. Okay. And of course, we try to embed it, our research also into universities. We try to have an intensive contact with the universities. For instance, we try to do it also in a formalized way. Each institute of DLR is embedded also into universities. Usually, at minimum, the director and the head of departments are also at the same time professor at the universities and the faculty, okay. So that the students have the possibility to work on our projects. And that makes it for the students attractive, and that helps us out also to recruit the new personnel.
Very good. No, absolutely. So what you're saying is essentially having this close relationship with academia, which really is a focal point for longer-term foundational basic research, coupled with the government, understanding roadmaps where technology should go that are informed with a close interaction with the industry. So there is more the risk being taken by the government on those long-term things. I think that's very important that we continue that dialogue, because ultimately industry, you're right, is more focused on the nearer term, and we have to have still in the pipeline of technology development those longer-term basic research funding programs. We talked a little bit earlier about the role of culture, right? And basically gets back to, when I talked about the 4 Ps, about people. So how do you really nurture, you recruit, you retain, have a culture of, some people say it's a culture of you always will say yes, you won't say no, right? And so Dan, you want to talk a little bit about 3M's culture, and then I'll turn it over to Scott. You want to say a little bit about, you're in the midst of, we are a traditional aerospace defense company in the midst of a Silicon Valley. How does that actually work? Are we interacting, or are we just a little bubble? Dan first.
Very good. So the culture is one of the things that we feel is critical, is to generating the innovation culture. And so 3M has a lot of history on how to support that. And some of them come with one of our past CEOs, McKnight. We call them the McKnight principles, basically. And fundamentally, it's, hire good people, hire smart people, right? Let them follow their passions and do their jobs, right? Let them make mistakes. Not the same mistake twice, right? So there's some management and guidance there. But then nurture that initiative and let them follow that passion for those ideas, right? So that's a key fundamental thing to the innovation culture. But we've also initiated some things to support that. And one of our big ones is 15% time. So the 15% rule at 3M is, if you're a researcher, spend 1 day a week following something that's not on your performance appraisal or your specific guide to your job responsibilities, and do something different. Think about a new idea, follow it, get to the point, as you mentioned, to a prototype or that concept. So that's a very important piece to the 3M culture, is the 15% time. And then we also have a number of initiatives to grant dollars, again, to enable people to follow their ideas and their passions. So you can submit grants for individual ideas to follow them, and again, use them either in 15% time, or the ultimate is to progress that in a prototype or feasibility to then get real support from the business, this buy-in approach and this alignment that we talk about from the business to get the kind of support you need to take it then to a commercial product. So those are all things within the 3M culture. And the other thing that we have as part of our culture is we invest in fundamental technology capabilities. So this gets to your point. And we want to have a lot of tools for our researchers to access, a lot of tools in the toolbox. And it gets to your point on, many times you want to take different technology capabilities, maybe developed for different industries or markets, and see how you combine those to then get something very unique and different. So we provide a lot of tools to our researchers by investing in those capabilities, and we call those then and identify them clearly as technology platforms. And then a key to those technology platforms is that they're not owned by any one specific business unit or laboratory. It's shared amongst the entire corporation. So we do a lot of things that I would say inside the company walls are very much like academics in terms of sharing information. So if you want to learn in your 15% time about a new technology, vapor deposition or 3D printing or whatever it is, you can go to the expert that's identified that's leading that initiative, and they'll tell you all about it. And they'll help you develop your prototype or your idea in their 15% time to demonstrate and get those ideas to the point where they're feasible. So those are some of the things in the culture that we value highly, but it is a cultural thing. It's not something that can just occur. You have to develop it, and we've done it since the start of our company.
Interesting. Scott, you have some thoughts on that?
So I'm new to this role, so I'm just still learning the way to deal with this kind of interesting, because we are viewed as kind of, as Alex said, kind of the old school aerospace, and I'm living in the middle of a very dynamic, very entrepreneurial area. And one of the things I'm now trying to do to be able to better attract the talent is we're trying to create our own platforms. You know, a small number of 6 platforms that are going to be these long-range visions. So that, and it'll be a technology/capability vision. So like one of them right now we're developing is hypersonics. You know, the ability to instantaneously deliver capability anywhere on the planet. So using those as a way to attract and energize a team. And when you do those kinds of things, it actually allows you to do several things. One of which, if with those kinds of visions, you can now start to connect the dots back to the need for basic research. So you get people to buy into those, you know, and it will sound a bit like science fiction, but that's okay. So we can start to motivate the need and connect to the universities and the need back to the basic research. It also helps stabilize our investment strategy. You know, rather than just chasing near-term insertion opportunities, we use the long-range vision to stabilize that investment, but then stress it to make sure that we can spin off some of those near-term capabilities so that we can start to develop the trust of the larger enterprise that we will deliver. And this is a mind shift change we're doing right now, because a lot of our guys, because of the declining budgets, we're looking for the near-term opportunities for insertion, but they're burning off a lot of energy doing that, and trying to stabilize it with a few long-range visions. That's the culture we're now trying to put in place. And then the last piece of it, and this goes back to some of the kind of the DARPA model. With the DARPA model, you know, the program managers change out. The entire staff changes out like every 4 years. And that's pretty extreme. But I do believe for a research organization, we need to have a certain amount of churn. You need to be bringing in new ideas. And so forcing ourselves to not get too complacent and look for opportunities for some people to kind of maybe follow their idea all the way to a line of business, which will open up opportunities for new people to come in. And I think it's actually very important for an ATC type organization to have that churn. Otherwise, you just will lose the spirit, I think.
Right. Wonderful.
Yes, to Dan, and because there was a very good explanation about the corporate culture. And now that it's also true that many of the new innovations are related to open innovation and industry ecosystem. So I just wondered if you give any specific instruction to your employees, you know, not just trying to make a breakthrough, but also how to guide your employees to think about actively engaged in the open innovation formation, ecosystem formation.
Right. So that open innovation, yeah, it's tapping into each individual within your organization and their ideas. Mm-hmm. But also I wanted to make a comment on what Scott was saying, is that 3M, what we like to do is bring our new hires into the company, into the corporate laboratories, and we then stress the fact that we want you to develop new technology platforms. So we want to take what you've done in your research, right, at the universities and some of the new ideas, and champion that within the company and find commercial opportunities to use that fundamental technology. But we also train them on, here's how the process works of commercialization.
That's great.
And we encourage them then to follow that technology development into the commercial applications, into the business units to develop that. And there are a few people who can consistently develop multiple technology platforms, and there's very few of those who you keep in a corporate laboratory. The rest of them need to migrate and understand how to then innovate technology into commercial applications. So that's
great. That's great. So Pierre, that's wonderful. So Pierre, I know you've had some interesting ideas in the past and currently at Thales in the additive manufacturing world. So when you speak about a disruptive technology, the fact how you go from a sector that was traditionally riveting a metal together, right, and now we're to the point where we can use specialty metals more than just thermoplastics to actually additively manufacture or 3D print. You want to talk a little bit about your perspectives on how that's rapidly evolving and changing the face of the aerospace manufacturing sector?
Yes, in fact, this aspect is very much linked to what Dan and Scott you said before, which is basically take the example of additive manufacturing. I just do a little bracket just to explain what we are doing in this area. We are working, as many other companies, doing additive manufacturing processes for building and manufacturing new items. We already sent some bracketry, some mechanism in orbit on some satellites. But not only, probably you know that we have an experiment called POP 3D, which is has been built in Torino, close to my office, for doing additive manufacturing on the International Space Station. This is just an example. With the support of Italian Space Agency, small, medium enterprise, and some academy specialized in this aspect, we built a small box which at the moment is flying to the International Space Station to be utilized. I know that NASA is doing similar things as well. In fact, we exchanged agreements in order to build the same things and look for differences. And this is just to say that if we are able to do this type of approach to avoid to have maintenance in the International Space Station and ultimately in the deep space mission, bringing all the stuff from Earth, but just in this case utilize the basic material, either metallic or polymeric, to do this exercise. I think this is a big advantage in view of future human exploration. But this is just an example. And coming back to the application of the process and manufacturing type of approach on our products, immediately came to our attention the fact that we have to create a new skill. Because not only for manufacturing purposes, because in this case the machines are well known, at least they are coming to be well known. With the short training you can have the capability to play with the machine. But the point is how you design, how you conceive a new architecture which are using this type of disruptive approach. Because the classical way in which academies, in which normal training centers are looking to the design of mechanism or design of parts, and finally, I hope also electronics, what is the classical way? So we don't have yet teachers, we don't have yet experience to go in this direction. This is one of the main reasons of having, as a CTO, basically, the possibility to work closely with the university and with the research center to build together in real time. So we need first to build competencies and then to use these competencies in our daily life.
Okay, wonderful. So right now we are just taking a time check. We're about 20 minutes to noon, and I think given we did start a little later, about quarter after, I don't know if we have a little bit of time to maybe a little bit more, Mary?
I would say go until noon if everyone is okay with that.
Okay.
And start the Q&A.
Okay. August, start the Q&A at noontime. Okay, so fine. Perfect. Okay, sounds good. So, wonderful. So wonderful. So we have a couple more questions. So here's a question. I'm glad, Piero, that you mentioned the aspect of small and medium industry, our small businesses, because I think another very important element when we talk about innovation is the interplay between large companies as well as small entrepreneurial startup companies. That interplay. And it's a very interesting, rich dynamic in an ecosystem, especially, for instance, in Silicon Valley. Many of these small startups are associated with universities. You have professors that go off and do a spin-off, or their students, they graduate, they have a spin-off. They have interesting ideas, but now you're faced with the idea of how you take your idea and how do you scale it up. to a large-scale application. And especially within the aerospace sector, there's always this interesting dynamic between there's an interesting new idea and how do you actually bring it in and worry about the certification, the qualification of this product within very demanding aerospace standards. So Alex, I want to turn to you, since you now have a foot within a large aerospace sector in Airbus, yet you're working in this innovation cluster, if you will, this the Ludwig Blockau campus. Tell us a little bit about some of the lessons learned or best practices of how you reach out to small businesses and have that dynamic of, in terms of bringing in these ideas, fostering the entrepreneurship and the mentorship, and then ultimately making sure that you have these new ideas that can actually be integrated and transition into a large corporation where they actually get deployed in terms of products and services.
Quite complex. First of all, I would say that each case is different.
Okay.
I mean, you may have, I don't know, if you've been to the Paris Air Show.
Once many years ago.
Okay,
many years ago.
You did see fly the E-Fan. That is a full electric airplane, which has been developed by the Airbus colleagues within 18 months. So in that case, developing and having an aircraft certified within 18 months, it's quite an achievement, especially for the old school aerospace folks, right? So they can be very well examples where you can have such, let's call it crazy ideas. You can nevertheless develop them all the way within your large corporation, as the case for this E-Fan. But in most cases, it's probably true, if you have really radical ideas and things you may not really used to, you think of, either partnering it or deciding to do an inside-out action, process. And that is actually what is happening at this Ludwig Blockau campus, one of the ideas happening there. To have folks working in the CTO organization or in the divisions, in the development areas, those guys having come up with good ideas, but which may not be part of the core business. There's now an opportunity for those guys to step out, at least for a while, of the group and, basically work along this innovation chain all the way to TRL9 to come up, hopefully, with a marketable product. And that is what, that's the framework allowing this kind of activity. That is what this campus is all about, where you have, in that case, I'm looking here to Dr. Moore here, whether the Bavarian government is heavily involved by funding, where you have academia being involved, be it the Technical University of Munich or even the University of the Federal Armed Forces, and many others, and industry, big companies like Airbus, like Siemens, or like small and medium-sized enterprises, working all together at this one site and hopefully coming up with new ideas all together, or if one of the partners is coming up with one, teaming up with those they deem relevant or interesting. So it's all about facilitating this process. I don't believe you can order it. You can't tell them, now you need to do this because of that. No, that's what's all about entrepreneurship. These folks have a good idea, hopefully in mind, and then you need to allow them a certain framework they can move within. Not making the same mistakes twice. Certainly there are some limitations, clear.
Right.
But that is how, at the end, innovation really works. You need to have the funds available, you need to have the right people at the place, and you need the right framework overall to allow such new ideas developing. And that probably has not been done at a level it should have. And now things are changing, and I believe, hopefully, this campus we are building up is going to be a good example for a hub for innovation in the aerospace.
Okay. Interesting.
So Alex, one thing, it's felt like you were talking around, but it seems like a word that I use a lot is that group needs freedom, freedom to explore the way they need to explore, you know, and the time to do it. And, you know, I think that's critical. That's a critical element to the success of this innovation.
And there are some other aspects we haven't talked yet. I mean, timing. I mean, innovation can, you know, sometimes you come up with an innovation, but it's simply too early. So that is then up to the experienced guys to say, keep that thing another 5 years in the drawer, and maybe then you come out. Because if you come out with it now, it will be burned. So, you know, it's about timing. You have tax issues, how to handle, you know, innovation. You need also to be clear on how to handle IPs. So there are all kind of aspects. You need a regulatory framework allowing innovation at the end. And it sounds very simple, but at the end that is something very complex to establish at the right time, at the right place, with the right people.
That is for me also is necessary a cultural change. In Europe, it's completely different like in America. In America, it is seen very positive if somebody tries to make a startup. Even if it does not work after some years, but he has tried it. It's a good guy. In Europe, if you coming with an application and the human resource asks, what have you done the last 3 years? Yeah, I have tried to make a startup, but it failed. Then you are a loser. And that is not good. It is necessary that we have a cultural change in Europe, that we encourage the young people which have these nice ideas, also to try it, even if it does not work, and 90% of all startups do not work, that is a reality. But we must encourage them and see it positively.
I think I think you're right. It really depends on industry segment. But it's interesting to observe that cloud computing to the IT industry has not only brought financial benefit to everybody, but also encouraged strongly the startups, because before that, each startup had to think of first buying servers that costed $100K and so forth. But right now, any startup entrepreneur just to start their experiment with a credit card by cloud service. So there is some positive feedback in such a background framework. So, if I understand right, the aerospace industry now seeing further closer relationship with the robotics and ITs, and now also people are now launching small size satellites to serve as various experiments. I think this industry is also facing some lowering of the barriers with newcomers, and that will form some positive feedback to such adoption of new ideas.
Okay. Piero?
Yeah, if you can contribute on this line, and also take into account what you said, Alex, about, for example, one critical aspect, which is managing of IPR, for example. I would like to put to your attention one example. If you look to technologies in the space exploration arena, which is by definition not a short term, it's really you have to work on enabling technology which will be available in 6, 10 years from now, to allow you to have the possibility to play your role either on commercial but basically on institutional field. And so this put the question how to play with institutional and commercial. At least this is our case, and I think it's similar to other companies. I would say not only commercial. We have to play with the institutional and the commercial aspect together. And I want to take the example, if we look to exploration of Mars or deep space, I would say, obviously you have to think in a different way, not really sending just astronauts, male and female, to a certain destination, but we say look into Star Trek movie and things like that is coming immediately to your attention, that you have to have a crew of robots which are helping you on the astronauts, but also on the site. And if you look to this perspective, not just because it's in the science fiction, but because it's the reality, you ask how I can have a mixed crew, having astronauts together with robots. And if you look to the robot state of the art on ground, I am thinking to a lot of advances that we have in several fields. So you recognize that maybe you can use, as was said by other colleagues, to spin in some technologies which are already well in place for Earth application, and try to improve in order to answer to, we say, ultimate application in space. And I like to mention, in Italy there is a center called Italian Technology Center, IIT, sorry, Italian Institute of Technology. It's a sort of MIT transferred in Italy, not in Massachusetts, which is working a lot on robotics, and DLR colleagues knows very well, because they are partners and also competitors sometimes. And they have already a sort of boy which is called iCube, a small boy which is able to do a lot of things. Is able to recognize, to listen, to touch, to we say do many actions, physical action. Yes, but there are a few points. If you look to materials, most of these materials are not good for space. If you look to energy, the energy that they use is the energy for ground. Sometimes they put, we say, electrical socket somewhere. Unfortunately, in space, this is not possible. And we have to look to different energy suppliers. There are conditions of work, obviously on Earth, apart certain Arctic regions, which are clearly good for robots. But if we go on Mars temperature, for example, or dust, etc., this is not good enough. So, all to all, what we did, we agreed to work with these people and found a new center which is called Human Space Robotics, which is looking to androids going together with the crew ultimately. I just spent a little bit more time on this aspect to explain you that not necessarily all the activity at the age of technology is done internally to the company, but through a proper governance, a proper strategic agreements, we create a sort of innovation, open innovation system which is able to pursue objectives which are not possible in the company itself alone. So this is the way in which some technology may be considered transversal.
Okay, wonderful. So in the interest of time, what I'd like to do now is turn to you. There's some very good questions that have come from you all, from the audience. So we'll try to interleave these with a few others if we depending on time. Here's an interesting question that really focuses on the people portion of innovation, and it gets to their education. So the question really is that it seems when you look at research and development, education and innovation, they're all linked. Clearly, we all know that these elements are closely coupled together. So the question is what is the impact and change on our university courses? So from an educational perspective, what are we doing? Is the business model for universities evolving to make sure that the skills, I can say from a personal perspective, having left, university engineering like 20 years ago, that there was really a focus on the design process. But now today, there is a strong push for design and build. so that students at the undergraduate level are actually getting the experience of rapid prototyping and actually turning their thoughts and ideas. Yes, it's one thing to be able to derive, all of the various equations for, anisotropic structural, right, Andreas? But it's another thing to be able to understand how are you going to actually turn this into production value. So how are universities actually evolving, and do you have any suggestions, working with industry, maybe internships or something that we should really should be thinking about? Andres, you want to start from your academic perspective?
Yes, what we try is that we offer for the students attractive projects, real flying projects, satellites, planetary lander, where they can work in form of master thesis, for instance, and they learn on practical things. And not only the theory, what is behind astronautics, also on practical things. And that is very necessary for their education and for their motivation. Okay. And it helps also us to recruit talents, of course.
Any industry perspectives on this, Piero?
Yeah, I can just give you my experience. I am part-time doing some teaching in university in a master course. What we did is a change of paradigm. In the past, the usual way to work with university was basically exchange teaching, exchange stages, and very simple theses made together. So now we discover that this is not anymore sufficient. So what we do, actually, this is one of my major activities that we are doing in our organization of CTO, is to write and agree a sort of strategic agreement with several interesting universities. First of all, where we are located, but not only. And in these agreements, there is obviously the basic things that I mentioned already, thesis, stages, and this type of things, but also something more, research done together, not just by case, but with a strategic perspective. We select topics and we say, we go together in this, and that, knowing that 1 + 1 maybe is 3 sometime. And also, we say, working together in front of external opportunities. And last but not least, as I said, financing master courses. This course that I mentioned is financed by our company in order to have people already trained to enter into our system, as well as in other system agencies or in other places. And so this is an example of how we try to play. And this includes, obviously, the basic situation in which we send people like me in the university to modify a little bit the way in which the courses are done, that prototyping is performed, in order to have more connection industry and academy. This is what we are doing normally.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes,
this is related to some topic we discussed last evening. Because over years, sometimes it might be useful to rethink about defining the core discipline of some major, like GLIC or mechanical engineering. Because thinking about IT field, maybe late 80s, 90s, a bright student, young guy can come to the GLIC and suddenly make good invention and become hero, change the whole world. But now the system has become so complex, sophisticated. So today, even for a very bright student, it's very difficult to change the whole IT system. And that, to some extent, discourages the bright student to try to major GLIC, I think. Or computer science. I heard a joke from an American professor that some university changed the name of computer science to a gaming department, and they started to have a very good student. But at the same time, the core of engineering school is to make a right modeling of the problem, and now that IT is trying to make a broader interaction with broader range of industries, I think it is very crucial for university people to keep attracting the good talent into such fields. Of course, other fields like finance and the economy are also important, but we even working in an industry together with academics, it is a important role to make young people motivated to join this field.
Very good, excellent. So here's another topic. We haven't actually explicitly talked about them yet, although we have mentioned them implicitly through some of the entrepreneurship activities, etc. This question is about the role that venture capitalists play. Especially within the aerospace sector. And I think it's interesting, if you look, at least I can say from a U.S. perspective, that historically at the beginning of, if you will, of aeronautics, there's a strong role that philanthropists played. If you look at the major universities like at MIT or at Caltech, it was Daniel Guggenheim and his foundation that actually started these laboratories. It was private capital that funded academia. And then, of course, you go through the whole World War II era and the rise of government and then corporate laboratories like the Bell Labs, the IBMs, et cetera, the 3Ms that emerged out of that. But now, as we mentioned earlier, there is a lot of severe pressure on governmental funding resources. And you see now the emergence of individuals, not just only the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezos of the world that are actually doing, private sector funding. So it's an interesting kind of cycle. So the question to all of you, whoever wants to take this first is, so what impact has the emergence of venture capitalists had on non-traditional, the aerospace sector? And, where do you think this will go, and what do you think this really says about the future of the aerospace sector? So Scott, you want to go with that?
I'll take a crack at this.
Sure.
We at Lockheed right now, we've certainly recognized this kind of the convergence of commercial and government space, and one of our challenges right now is with the traditional government customer. They tend to drive the pace that you move, which is pretty slow, and so we have recently started to engage with a small number of venture capitalists, and my belief, and we're new into this process. It's about 3 years into it. But my belief is that that interaction will actually change the way we operate and allow us to get back to where we can move fast. And if Lockheed's going to be successful at this new space, the Space 3.0, it's going to be all about being able to increase the pace of our thinking, our development. So we're very excited about it, but we're really new into this. I'd say we're about 3 years into this experimental phase for us.
Mm-hmm. Any perspectives from a European perspective in terms of the venture capital community, their role?
What I can say is that very recently Airbus Group has just set up an own venture capital fund called Airbus Capital.
Okay, or VC, and it's in
exactly. And actually, it's been set up in Silicon Valley.
Yes, all right. Mm-hmm.
With a quite decent amount of money available. So maybe. The idea behind is to do things on your own, because you know best what's needed for your business in the future. Mm-hmm. And if you have a good tool not only to screen the market, but afterwards to really take those on board you may be interested in, is certainly a very promising way to handle things in the future. How, in general terms, these venture capitals played a role in Europe, certainly not as big as it's been the case in the US, that's for sure. But for SMEs and startup companies, there was always also in Europe there were some funds available clearly. But it has to do with what Andreas said before. It's also a cultural thing. This whole risk attitude. If an entrepreneur fails at the end, I have wasted money. But if at the end, if 1 out of 10 turns to be successful and you have your ROI at the end available, everything's fine. But it's a cultural issue.
Yeah.
And
I have to say one thing. I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm one of the founders of SES, and our first $1 million came from. It was the dollars at that time, because if you can believe it, it was 1984. And it was a private venture, SES, started with Astra, and our first $1 million came from angel investors.
Investor, interesting.
Angel investors.
Okay.
We got no venture Johnson is traveling on my behalf. If you are kind to me, I will look kindly on your banking class in December. 10 banks. And they were amazed that they had actually made money in SES, that they made billions. And I said, no, you've learned something much more. You've learned how to invest in a high-tech company. And, you know, it was at that point that Dresdner then became Dresdner Morgan Grenfell, that, you know, Deutsche became whatever which company they bought. Or no, Dresdner became Kleinwort Benson, Deutsche became Deutsche Morgan Grenfell, and they all put this on their front doors to say, we were first investors, but the real first investor was an angel.
Interesting. I'm definitely not a venture capital specialist, but what I know, or what I believe I know, there's a big cultural difference between the US and in Europe, what to do afterwards with your venture capital fund. In the US, it's very usual to go to the stock market afterwards, and then if the investor comes up with an ROI of 300, 400,000%, then he's really interested in doing that, right? In Europe, after you know, having invested in a company and turning that company or your capital into stocks is simply not. It's not a culture. You do. So and at the end, if €1 you turn out €1.20 after 5 years or 10 years, you may think, yeah, but maybe I invest in something different. So you know, it's this whole stock market issue. There's a complete different way of seeing things in this area. So, but again, I'm not a specialist. I'm not a financial guy. So, but that definitely plays a major role in it.
Okay, maybe 30 seconds from Piero and Yasunori-san on this, and then we'll just maybe 1 or 2 more questions.
Yeah, I think
we'll have to
investing in venture capital is very effective, particularly in the US. And the point is something different, is that the in-house R&D will turn out to be a loss if that technology activity was not commercialized. But investing in venture capital is kind of a recurring mechanism. That's one point. And particularly useful if it is not a technology but a new emerging business model. This is a very good way to take a look at.
Oh, just to say that I am perfectly in line what you mentioned, Alex. Our difficulty is to pass from the startup condition, if you want, to a certain consolidation. And this is one case in which our relationship with the startup and small medium enterprise may work well, because you can reach an agreement, in this case, with the specific startup of interest in order to say, okay, now we are a big company, we may play for you a certain number of things that you are not able to do alone, but please give me a sort of exclusivity on your type of business, on your technology, or whatever it is. And we found that this is working very well, and it's a win-win approach, because they are happy to have not to spend 1.2 reached in with a huge effort just to make a copyright or keep the copyright alive, etc., but continue to invest in the innovation. So I personally experienced 2-3 examples of this type all over Europe, which worked well, and so I think this is more close to our mentality. Obviously, US is different.
Right. So I think this is a perfect, you know, if you will, a segue to this last question, which I think you've largely addressed, but I think it is important given this is a conference focused on innovation, which was, and I believe perhaps the author of this question was with a small startup, which says, you know, most of us are all part of major organizations which could help and foster innovation. What does a tech startup need to do to get involved with their project with a large aerospace corporation? How do you sponsor prototyping? How would you take a technology that they claim to be a game changer and go through, if you will, an evaluation and approving process? So ultimately, what would it convince you to take the risk with a small startup? I think that maybe is probably the last good question to end this panel on. So a few takers for the last 3 minutes on, here's a startup company. They have this interesting idea, and what's your process in a corporation? Scott, you want to take that?
So one path in the U.S. is, the U.S. has the Small Business Innovative Research effort. And so one of the things Lockheed actually does is that it sits there and looks across all those topics and uses those as a way to connect with small companies. So if I was to advise a small company, if they wanted to make a connection, would be to get involved in that game, reach out, read through those, and there's hundreds of topics. And that becomes a kind of that's an easy way for us to find some of these kind of small companies that are doing aerospace relevant research.
Mm-hmm. Somebody from Dan, how do you play in that arena?
Yeah, we do similar things, and a lot of the big product platforms that are part of 3M today were acquisitions of startups and university research. So I think the key is for 3M is to understand the fundamental step, the fundamental capability that's there. It's very difficult a lot of times for 3M to assess the competitive information. So having a good set of here's what our technology does, and we've compared it to X, Y, and Z, and here's the real value proposition, and having that clear helps 3M assess those things. Many times we'll bring new ideas and bring them to our experts in that area for such an evaluation process. So that's really the key, is it's got to be a step function. It's got to be something that is a core fundamental technology. And then we have to understand the assessment relative to competitive technologies or opportunities.
And that would even apply if somebody came to you with a space idea, right? Because you're not typically viewed as a space company, but you'd have to do all those, the calculus of those factors.
Yep.
Any last-minute European perspective on this, Piero?
Yeah. What we are doing, I would say quite recently, is last 3-4 years, we are organizing trying to facilitate these contacts. We are organizing techno days, innovation days in different places, mainly incubators of universities, incubators of districts, and so we are running all around Europe to meet this type of startups. And basically, we work like this. We agree with the incubator governance to have a first list of possible contacts, and then in an approach B2B, if you want, we leave them for 1 hour to express their we say perspective, the idea, what is behind. We come with our expert, and we have a first run. And then the selection internally, as you said, comparing to our strategy and our competition, the selection of some of this will be a propedeutical to a more deep contacts and analysis. And we do normally this, is a huge effort for us. And we do normally CTO people together with purchase office, together with other part of the company, business-oriented, in order to then, we say, screen the most interesting things. And when you arrive to a certain conclusion, then we start a pilot project together. So we decide together to apply or to go together in some research activities or whatever is applicable in that case. Okay. So this is normally what we do systematically, I have to say, in several cases. And the result is interesting because obviously it requires a lot of work, but few interesting opportunities are popping up.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, time flies when you're having fun, and so at this time I'd like to thank again the IAF for hosting this. I'd like to thank the Bavarian Ministry of Economic Affairs for this room, and on behalf of my boss, Dr. Kyoki Jackson, who is the CTO of Lockheed and hopefully might participate in one of these events in the future, I'd like to thank, first of all, thank you all, and then give a round of applause to our panelists. All right, thank you. So this concludes this event, and I think now we can move over to the residents for the continuation of IAF activities. Thank you.
Good.
All right.
Scott?
Alex, good. Thanks.